the stress level has to be continually increasing. That's an easy thing to do. It happens automatically in the novice program, right? Because you're just adding 5 pounds every time. It's easy to screw things up really bad on the once you've gone to weekly increases and then bi-weekly increases and so on, because people tend to dump stress. So things cannot get easier. If they get easier, if you're excited about the programming change that you just made, it wasn't a good programming change. Like, you're about to run into some problems.
Everyone's favorite guest is back. Nick is here. We're going to talk about intermediate programming. If you haven't seen the episode entitled How to Do the Starting Strength Novice Linear Progression, you should listen to that one first, unless you're getting towards the end of your LP and you're pretty sure you've done most of it right. In which case, you can jump straight to this episode, because we will start by reviewing the steps it takes to get through your novice stage per lift, just a quick summary. And then we'll talk about what it means to be an intermediate, what the definition is. And then we'll give you some suggestions. And it's not quite as templatized as you'll discover. It's more about understanding how to apply stress and what's necessary to recover from based on your current stage of training advancement. So with that in mind, Nick, why don't we start there? So let's start with the squat. Can you just give us a very quick summary of how you would progress the average trainee through squat from day one through the end of the novice program? So let's say 40-year-old male jumps into a gym, training 3 days a week. What does his squat programming look like from day one through finish the novice phase?
Yeah. So the video that we did, and I think this may have been episode 1 of the Gyms podcast, right?
I think so.
It's probably one of the most valuable videos for programming that I've ever done. So I pass that around to coaches, especially, a lot. So everybody, if you haven't watched that, you should go back and watch it for sure.
Yeah, we'll link to it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of as simple as the novice program is, there's a ton of misunderstanding about how to actually apply it for some reason, because everybody wants to make things more complicated than they need to be.
Yep.
But the main idea is you are going to start with the simplest and most effective version of things that will get you the most progress and most benefit in terms of total output that you can get, right? And this is the same for any process, any complicated process that you could embark upon, whether it's physical or anything else. So the Starting Strength Novice Linear Progression gives us that. It gives us a nice prepackaged template, really is what it is. It's a packaged template that you can apply based on the situation that will get you a lot of strength very, very quickly. It'll progress your variables in a way that makes sense, because what we're looking for is a strength adaptation. Therefore, you need to apply a force production stress. And the Novice Linear Progression uses the 5 lifts that give you the biggest force production stress throughout your body in order to make you strong quickly, right? So the way we're going to approach this is systematically starting with the Novice Linear Progression and running a process and making changes as they become necessary. All right. So one of the most important principles, now that we're going to start talking about programming beyond the Novice Linear Progression or beyond the novice phase, and I don't know if we need to cover this again, but a novice is just anybody who's never done it, right? And the term novice is helpful, but it can be misleading depending on who you're talking to and how you're using the term. So I like to think about it, and for the purposes of this discussion, it may be helpful to just think about it as your starting point. It's your entry point into a process of performance improvement. So you're going to start with the most basic program that you can, and then you're going to change things as changes become necessary. So getting back to my point, anytime we talk about programming changes, if you are doing things correctly, and we're making the assumption that you want to continue getting stronger, and that efficient use of your time in the gym is important, and that efficient movement is important. So if those three things are important to you, and they take priority because you want to run an efficient process, then you need to consider things on a deeper level than most people do. Because what most people do is they run a program for a given period of time. Usually the program is templated out for 8 to 12 to 16 weeks or whatever it is. And then after that program's over, they switch programs. Or more commonly for our friends and fans, you'll start with a program that makes sense and you make a whole bunch of progress very quickly. And then when things get hard is when you make a programming change. So all of those things may be true, but the proper approach is to, and this is the very important point here, is that programming changes are made reluctantly. Programming changes are made because you have to make a programming change, not because you want to make a programming change. All of my assumptions right now are that we're running this process optimally. Mm-hmm. So reluctant programming changes, and I don't remember if we mentioned this the last time we talked programming, but first thing you have to look at is your technique efficient, mostly efficient, right? Are you doing things that are affecting the weight on the bar significantly? If that's the case, get it tuned up. Get a form check, go see a coach, do it online, whatever, but get your form tuned up. Second thing, are you training consistently? So I'm making the assumption that you are actually training and not missing 3 or 4 workouts a month. If that's the case, don't make a programming change. Get your consistency in order, or your compliance in order, and then see what happens, right? And then the third thing is recovery. Are your recovery, all of the things that go into recovery, are those in order? If they're not in order, then either get them fixed, or you may need to make a programming change that's not the optimal deal in terms of continuing to get stronger. All right. So with that kind of groundwork laid, I'm making the assumption that we're proceeding optimally, that you're recovering, meaning that you're steadily, gradually gaining weight and getting bigger and stronger. If you're overweight, you're either holding your weight or you're very gradually losing weight, depending on what your goals are. But most people, most of the time, are going to be gaining a little bit of weight on the novice program. That you are making appropriate jumps, all the recovery stuff, and that you are not missing workouts, and that your form is pretty good. All right. So with all those things said, for a squat, it's the basic program: squatting every workout, 3 days a week, 1 rest day in between, adding 5 pounds to the bar every single workout. Right. So
3 sets of 5.
3 sets of 5. Now, that's the novice linear progression. All right. So as soon as we start messing with that program, you're no longer doing the novice linear progression. Now, that's not a bad thing. All right. But just understand that the trade-offs at this point are that you are slowing down your progress in order to continue making progress longer term. All right. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. So we're adding 3 sets of 5, or I'm sorry, we're adding 5 pounds to the bar, the 3 sets of 5 for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, depending on where you started and your age and all these different things. So let's say your average 40-year-old guy comes into the gym and he squats 85 pounds, 90 pounds the first day. I expect this first programming change to happen maybe when he's up around the mid 200s for a squat. Mid 200s, it's usually about where it starts happening. And all I'm looking at as a coach is bar speed, and then also, just generally how the client or the lifter is looking and feeling workout to workout, right? So as I'm seeing over time that the bar speed is that things are happening to the bar speed within a set, right? Because the load is always going to make the bar speed slower, but I'm noticing that things are starting to get much, much harder, or I'm noticing that the next workout it may result in a failed rep. I'll make a programming change. Again, provided that all of the other parameters are in order. And that first programming change is just do a light day in the middle of the week. So take 80% off the bar and then proceed as usual on Monday and Wednesday. So it's important to talk about what are the trade-offs there. The trade-off is that I've slowed my progress by 5 pounds a week. but consider where you are 3-4 months, 12 to 16 weeks into this program. You're adding weight every single time. And the moment comes where you are faced with potentially bailing on a rep or giving yourself a light day in the middle of the week and then hitting the workout on Friday fresh and excited about that PR rather than just continuing to grind through and potentially failing a rep. And I keep saying failing a rep because for the people in the demographic that I'm typically dealing with, they're risk averse. They're something on their body probably hurts, and I don't want to give a new lifter. These are new lifters, right? 3 to 4 months in. I don't want to give a new lifter the idea that it's okay to fail and set the bar down on the pins. So we're not going to do that. We're going to keep making progress. So if that means slowing down 5 pounds a week, I'm cool with that because it'll give me another month, another 6 weeks, sometimes even another 8 weeks of progress where alternatively, we could have just beat the shit out of ourselves for the next 5 workouts and hit a wall a week and a half from now, right? So that's the way I'm looking at it. So relatively minor change, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but I just gave myself another month of runway with this individual.
By adding a light day.
By adding a light day, yeah. So in other words, my next big programming change happens at the 300-pound mark rather than at the 265-pound mark.
Yep.
Does that make sense how I said that? So
absolutely.
So I could keep pushing on this guy and have him start questioning everything at 265, or we could slow down just a little bit, right? Just back off this throttle back a little bit, keep making progress. And then now when we need to make the next programming change, he's at 300 pounds.
Yep.
For a dude who started at 90 pounds with his squat, this is a significant difference. These 30 pounds matter a lot.
Sure.
Right.
And just to reiterate your point, Nick, keep in mind, these are illustrative numbers. A lot of people get fixated on numbers and think when I hit number X, I need to make a change. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying it's individual dependent, and it's dependent on your bar speed. And the worst thing you can do for your training is get some number in your mind, and you have to make some change when you hit some certain number. That is not how this works.
Yeah. Well, and here's another good point. Because it's such a small change, what if you made the change too early? Doesn't matter. Not a big deal, right? Because it'll get hard soon. It'll get harder soon enough. So, you can assign whatever values you want to continuing to grind yourself into the pavement workout after workout. I'd much rather see you continuing to lift and progress for the next 2 years than start drinking a gallon of milk and gain 30 pounds to put 15 pounds on the bar. That's not a good idea. So,
yep.
So again, using just the general example here, the guy's now up around 300 pounds for his squat, and he is on a progression where every Wednesday is a light day. So we got some runway out of that small change. So let's say high 200s, low 300s. I'm going to make the next programming change again based on how the lifter is responding to things in general. You have to remember that you've got recovery and you've got strength and you've got stress and you've got recovery just kind of moving up at the same time. And there's just these points where they meet, and you gotta just kind of back off a little bit to keep things moving in the proper direction. So the next change that I'll make is that I will only go up on the first set of 5 for the squat, because that's usually, even though it usually doesn't feel the greatest that first set, but you're fresh, first set of 5 maybe feels the hardest, and then after that the rest of the workout almost feels like cake after you take a little bit of weight off. So we're keeping all of the volume and everything pretty much the same. The only thing we're messing with is intensity. So let's say the first set of 5 on that Monday is 300 pounds, then we'll do 2 sets of 5 at 90% of that, so 270, right? So and then the middle day of the week, Wednesday, is still 80%. So that's going to be at 240 or so, right? 240 for the 3 sets of 5. And then on Friday, we go up to 305 for the first set and 275 for the 2 backup sets. And again, that's another change that gives me another 6 to 8 weeks of runway. So now, we're not making the next programming change until and I know like some people are like doing the math and checking my numbers. It doesn't fucking matter, right? But the next programming change is not going to happen until we're at like 340, 330, 340. So we start getting into weekly increases at the mid 300 pound mark, rather than at the high 200s or mid 200s, which you know a lot of guys doing this on their own are looking to make programming changes into weekly increases in the high 200s and low 200s. It's not that's you, as Rip would say, you're not doing the program right. So yeah, and just to back up a little bit, anything that is not 3 sets of 5, squatting 3 days a week, adding more weight to the bar every single time, is no longer the novice linear progression, right? And that's okay. So we're moving beyond it, and we're advancing our programming variables, progressing our programming variables into a little bit more complexity in order to account for the increased weight and recovery, and to be able to continue driving progress without tapping yourself out in terms of recovery, right?
Got it. All right. So the squat summary, as Nick just outlined and is in more detail in the podcast episode we referenced, is 3 sets of 5, go up 5 pounds of workout, do that 3 days a week. And then when the bar speed starts to slow down and you're concerned that you might miss a rep, add a light day, 3 sets of 5 at 80%. And that's on Wednesday. And then when you have the same thing happen and it's time for another change, then you do drop sets. So you go up on the first set, and then you do 90% for the last 2 sets, and you do that twice a week. So now, so at that point, you're still going up twice a week, so you're technically still a novice. And when you move to weekly jumps, you're then an intermediate on that particular lift. So Nick, if you're thinking about a standard member at a starting strength gym who's training 3 days a week, 40-year-old guy in this scenario, how would you then transition him from that last stage, so drop sets and a light day, to a more intermediate program with weekly progression?
I'm just going to decide which day is going to be the heavy day. So it's either going to be Monday or Friday, and usually it's Monday, because you've got the weekend and stuff, but that's personal preference. It doesn't really matter. You pick one day of the week to be the heavy day, and then you only go up on that first set for that one day. So let's just say we're at 340 for the squat now. 340 for a set of 5 is the guy's PR. So next Monday he goes to 345, and then 90% for the other 2 sets. 80% on Wednesday, and then on Friday it's 3 sets of 5 at 90% of 345. So that's a weekly increase on the squat. So that's what you would consider intermediate programming for the squat at that point. Now, remember what I said about the stress and recovery parameters kind of meeting and having this inflection point. When you get to that point, honestly, that single set of 5 isn't going to give you much progress. We're talking about a month tops, maybe less. So that's how I initially set it up, and I try to squeeze as much out of that just one time a week heavy set of 5 as much as I can. Usually other things in the program are going to help that, like how hard are they working on their, like how high is their deadlift. If the deadlift's real high, they'll probably keep making progress on that squat for a while. If their deadlift and their squat are real close, that their overall stress is going down. So or staying about the same. So you kind of are going to get stuck. So this is where kind of the whole program needs to be taken into account. But my point is that's not going to last long. So you have to be thinking ahead to what the next change is going to be that I'm going to make. So, but you've got the template now, right? You've got heavy, light, medium. You've got a heavy, light, medium setup. What doesn't matter if heavy is on Monday or Friday. Now you just decide, okay, so my heavy day is going to be heavy. Now what do I do next? And probably the simplest thing to do is, well, let's go to triples, and we'll do some triples. We'll do 3 sets of 3 and start driving PRs on 3 sets of 3 for that Monday, and then leave everything else the same. Right. And then eventually it's going to be like, okay, 3s are not working. And then you just run it out. Like it's typically what people say when they run it out. So I'm going to do singles now. Now, when you get to singles, you got to be careful, because you're potentially dropping a whole bunch of stress by doing that. So, because you went from 5 reps to 10 reps with your triples to now, maybe 5 singles. It's usually not enough. So usually if I'm having someone do singles, I'm having them do some back off work on that same day, or again, depending on the rest of the program, something else may be going on with a deadlift or something to keep the stress fairly high.
And
So
just to clarify, Nick, you were talking about having the deadlift pretty far ahead of the squat. And based on our previous conversations, in my experience, I think what you're talking about is roughly 50 pounds plus ahead of the squat for your deadlift number. Is that about right?
at least, yeah, at least that's where it should be. And it might not be at this point in your program, but this is the opportunity now to run your deadlift up, right? Because you're only squatting one heavy set of 5. So whatever, and at this point, I guess if you want to go through each lift, we will. But at this point, you're probably only deadlifting once a week. So that deadlift has to be a set of 5, and it has to be super heavy, and it has to be going up. So if I've got a lifter who's, let's say, squatting 345 for one set of 5 on Monday and deadlifting 340 or 350, we're going to start making 10-pound jumps on the deadlift, just to bring it up, because they can, right? As long as all the positioning and mechanics and everything's right, we're going to start running up the deadlift as quick as we can.
Got it. I do want to do this for each lift, Nick, but before we get into the other 3 lifts, I want to ask you to shed some light on the principles that are at play here. So we're moving away from a very templatized approach in the novice phase where you just do this, then do that, then do that.
Absolutely.
And then we're moving into intermediate, and then things become a little bit more murky. And this is where people get tripped up. So can you talk to us about what the considerations are in your mind when you're making programming changes at this level?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is why I keep saying, like, anytime you deviate from the basic novice linear progression, you are no longer doing the novice linear progression, and that's okay, because we have other considerations. Now we're still really close, right? So you can call it whatever you want. We're still really close because we're still going up twice a week. We only have one light day in the middle, but we're modifying the program, but it's necessary to modify the program. So with that said, you can approach this however you want. The way I approach it is going to be different from maybe the way you approach it, or the way another more experienced coach. Like, some guys like to use triples at the end of the novice, call it advanced novice or whatever. Like to use triples. It doesn't matter. Like, the point is that the weight on the bar needs to keep going. I prefer this approach because it keeps us on sets of 5. It's simpler, right? It's simpler to deal with, because all we're messing with is just intensity and that's it, just intensity over the course of the week. So it's easier for me to explain, and it's easier for me to program for people. So it doesn't matter how you do it. Just make sure that the weight on the bar is going up. And the further you deviate from 5s at this stage in someone's training, the more likely you are to fuck things up, right? So 3s are still okay. A single start to become a problem, and then the other direction, going into 7s, 8s, 10s, it just doesn't work at all. So you're no longer strength training at this point. So I always try to keep 5s as the main thing. And this isn't anything this is all just the way it is, and the way we've always talked about this. You want to keep 5s in the program as long as possible. So this is the way I do it.
Let me just pause you there real quick, Nick, because
yeah.
isn't there a caveat that 5s applies to slightly below average males and above? In other words, you probably want to end this process doing 3s for your typical female client, or for your significantly below average male client. Is that right?
For sure. Women are going to be doing 3s fairly early. So, and that's a pretty universal change, that when women need to train heavier, the bar needs to get heavier because of the neuromuscular efficiency situation being different from males, right? So they recruit muscle mass at a slower rate, is probably the way to think about it, than males. So the way you get more muscle mass recruited is by increasing load, right? And more time and more load. So what you'll see with women is that they can grind through reps heavier at sets of 3, and they need to, in order to continue driving a strength adaptation. So everything I just said in terms of 5s make that threes for women.
Yep.
That's typically what you see. Yeah,
Got it.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we're yeah, since we're super sexist, when I talk about this stuff, it's generally with like a typical male, a typical male trainee. But it's not that complicated for women. It's just 3 sets of 5 becomes 5 sets of 3.
Right. And by the time this episode goes live, I will have a video up going through the novice linear progression specific to the female population. So Bree, please link to that as well. And Nick, before we move into the other lifts, I wanted to clarify one more big picture concept with you. When a trainee has a problem with intermediate programming, so they start missing reps or whatever other problem might occur, how do they understand what's causing that problem? How do they think about that problem so they can figure out how to solve it? Does that question make sense?
I think so. So when somebody starts failing reps,
so the program's not working. Why? How do I figure out what? How do I figure out what I did wrong here?
Gotcha. Okay. So provided that it's not a technique error, all right. So we always have to consider the efficiency of the technique. Provided that it's not a technique error and it's a programming issue, then there are 2 ways that you should look at. Overall progress, and so this kind of goes into a larger point here. So how you determine what kind of programming change you need to make. So when we're talking about the squat, you can think about it in terms of stress and recovery not aligning in terms of recovery not being able to keep up with the amount of stress that you're applying, right? So in other words, I hate to say like under recovered. It's just too much stress or not enough stress. It's probably the way to think about it, right? Because again, we're assuming that you're doing things properly and you're recovering properly. If you're not, then it's kind of a separate conversation about what we need to do, because now you're considering trade-offs. You're considering like, all right, well, I know that I can only sleep 4 hours continuously a night because I have an infant at home. So I'm making this programming change knowing that it's not the best thing to do, and I'm just kind of holding on. But assuming that everything is in line, you can simplify it in terms of too much stress or not enough stress. So when you have too much stress, which is typically what occurs when you get to the end of your novice linear progression with the squat and the deadlift, what you'll see is a decline in performance that's gradual, right? So if you kind of imagine your performance curve on the squat, let's just look at the squat. It's going up like this, right? As when you first start the program, it goes like this and it shoots straight up, and then it starts to flatten out a little bit, right? And then let's say that you're starting to have that your recovery capacity is not keeping up with the regular increases on the weight of the bar. What you'll see is a slight, a steady decline in performance, meaning that let's just look at the bar speed. You'll see the bar speed just getting slower and slower and slower every rep. Every workout, the bar speed gets slower and slower and slower, right? So that's an indicator to me that you're not adapting, for whatever reason. So the bar speed will always be slow on rep 4 and definitely rep 5 if you're doing things correctly, but it shouldn't be the same speed on rep. It shouldn't like rep 1 of the next workout, first set, rep 1 of the first rep of the first set of the next workout shouldn't look like the 4th rep of the 3rd set of the last workout. So I hope I'm being clear there, right?
Yeah.
So that's what that's what I mean by reduction, because it's only 5 pounds more. So I shouldn't see a bar speed that looks like it's 30 pounds heavier.
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking at. And if that's what I'm starting to see, then I'm making a programming change because I'm starting to see a decline in performance. Or aches and pains, right? Like this hurts, this other thing hurts. I'm having trouble sleeping. I have trouble getting to sleep. I feel like I can't eat after, all these different things that weren't a problem 3 weeks ago, like all of a sudden are a problem. And it may not actually be like a physical recovery issue. It may be all up here, but either way, the solution's the same for me, right? If I add a light day, I might solve all those problems right now. So I'm looking at all those things. Bar speed primarily, because that's my mostly objective based on my experience indicator of what's going on. Could I tell the lifter move the bar faster? Maybe, right? But I could do that and see what happens, and it's going to depend on the lifter, how hard they want to push against the bar. But I'm not looking at this guy for the first time today. I've been watching him lift for the last 4 to 6 months, so I know what things look like. What I know what to expect. And then I'm hearing things from the lifter about aches and pains, things that are starting to happen that are weird. So that's what I mean by that. If that's what I mean by too much stress.
Okay.
Under stressed, so not enough stress, looks like this. Here's your performance curve, and this is what you see on the press, or what you see if you try to keep women on sets of 5 for too long, right? So in other words, you detrain, it's not enough stress. So you see your performance curve go like this, it moves up quickly, and then you have a sharp drop. Like you just have a sharp drop in performance. Nothing hurts. Everything looks good. Bar speed on rep 1 of set 1 of today's workout looks the same as rep 1 of set 1 of the last workout. Like the same bar speed. Like bar speed's going great. You're thinking you're about to have a fantastic workout, and all of a sudden, bam, you start failing. And this is what everybody on the face of the earth has experienced with their press. And this is what women have experienced when they try to do sets of 5 for too long. And that's what that looks like, right? So those are the kind of the cleanest ways to look at these two things.
Very helpful.
Yeah, so people will say something like, and I still see this on the internet, people responding in the Facebook group and stuff. A guy starts failing his press for the first time, and people will say, "Well, you're not recovered. You need to go to 3s, or you need to eat more and then try it again." You're pressing 145 pounds. Eating more is not your problem. You're just not getting enough stress.
One caveat I think that needs to be added to this is if you are an intermediate trainee and you're doing your own programming and you're trying to make sense of how to adjust variables, and you just understood the concepts that Nick has shared with you in terms of whether your problem is too much stress or not enough stress. If you make a change, make a small change. Nick, can you expand on that concept?
Yeah, your original question was an intermediate trainee who starts failing reps, how do they determine what the problem is?
Yep.
So yeah, first question to ask yourself, other than am I recovering all the other things, right? Am I training? Am I actually training? Am I missing workouts? Is my form good? So actual programming questions, because you've covered all of the low-hanging fruit, in other words. So it's time to decide if you need to make a programming change or why you need to make a programming change. So the first thing is, am I getting too much stress or not enough stress? Mm-hmm. Really the answer is in looking over everything I just said, right, in terms of what your performance looks like, but also you look at the last 2 to 3 weeks of your training log. Like as coming out of the novice phase, late novice phase, intermediate, you should still be seeing a continual increase in stress. So overall, your stress should continue to go up. If you've done something like go from 3 sets of 5 to 3 sets of 3, you've reduced your stress, right? So you've reduced your stress. If you haven't at the same time bumped the weight up significantly, right? Because the volume and the intensity are two things that they're like, if like, think of a soundboard, right? And you have the overall level of whatever you're listening to, and then you have 2 knobs over here that you can manipulate to mess with that overall level. So you can crank the intensity all the way up to make that overall level go up, but you're going to start clipping, you're going to start cutting things off if you don't reduce the volume lever, right? And vice versa. So your overall stress has to be continually going up. And if all of a sudden you've done something to your program over the last couple of weeks, you're going to see it on this week's program with a failed rep. So an example of that would be in something like the press. Like you're doing the press and you're doing 3 sets of 5, and then you start failing. So you did 3 sets of 5 on Monday, and then you did a set of 5, a set of 4, a set of 2 on Friday. And then you said, well, fuck, I failed. So I'm going to try it again. But, you've only done 11 reps or whatever it is that day. You were supposed to do 30 reps for the week and you only did 21 reps for the week, right? At a point where you're needing every bit of stress for the press, and not only that, you need every bit of practice for the press. So what happens on next Monday? You try it again, then now you don't get any sets of 5. Like you get 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. You're like, what the hell's going on? And then you go like eat a double cheeseburger and drink a bunch of milk, thinking that's going to help. But you've reduced the stress. You've dumped a bunch of stress. So yeah, look at your training log over the last 2 weeks. What did I do? What did I do that caused this? If you haven't done anything, like everything's been going fine, or and then all of a sudden you're having a problem, then you need to figure out, okay, where do I need to add more stress? Like the example there would be 1 set of 5 with backoffs on Monday, like how we started the intermediate program. 1 set of 5 with backoffs on Monday, light day on Wednesday. Light day Wednesday, and then medium day Friday. So if that's the program you're running and it's going smoothly, it's going fine, you're adding 5 pounds to that first set every Monday. And then all of a sudden you come in and like, it's tough. Like that's rep number 4, rep number 5 is really, really slow. Then you come in the following Monday and rep 1 is moving at the same speed as rep 4 was last Friday. You've got a problem, right? You don't have enough stress. So that's a situation where your recovery is now, bam, right in line with the amount of stress, and you're not disrupting homeostasis enough to make another adaptation. So what you need to do then is add more stress. So probably the safest way to do that is, okay, so I'm going to go to 3s and I'm going to make a 10-pound jump and I'm going to do 3 sets of 3. So you've gone from 1 set of 5 heavyweight to 3 sets of 3 at a heavyweight. So you've got 9 heavy reps now rather than 5 heavy reps. So ask yourself, is that more stress or less stress? It's more stress, right? So I've got 10 more pounds on the bar and I'm doing 9 reps. And when you've been doing a set of 5 for the last 8 months, sets of 3, even at a 10-pound increase, it's like a vacation. It feels awesome, right?
For a little bit anyways.
Well, for a little bit, right? Until you add 40 pounds to the bar, and then it sucks again.
Yeah.
Right.
That's super.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make
Thank you for that. I think I hear a lot of confusion and questions about exactly this topic, and I think that sums it up nicely. So we've got the squat out of the way. We've got the principles out of the way. I want to spend the rest of this time just going through the rest of the lifts quickly, and then if we have time at the end, we could do some more discussion. Let's talk about the deadlift, because that's kind of an easy one. So Nick, why don't you walk us through the standard progression from day 1 on the deadlift up until kind of early, mid, intermediate?
Yeah, sure. And this is part of the problem of categorizing yourself as a novice, intermediate, or advanced lifter, right? So it's helpful in terms of thinking about where you are in terms of your overall like lifelong training experience. But at any given moment, if you're making decisions based on where you think you are for, it's just not useful, because you could be doing novice programming on your squat and be doing intermediate style programming for your deadlift. Mm-hmm. And that's totally common, but nobody gets all weird in the head about it.
That's the way it should be. You're not, and that we should have mentioned that at the outset. You're not just an intermediate one day. You progress each lift individually.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I will, I'll talk about myself or trainees in terms of these categories of training advancement, just so you have a reference of how long this person's been training and how strong they are, and also what kind of programming generally they're doing. But it ultimately it doesn't matter, first of all. So don't assign any kind of importance to. So don't make it like an achievement that you're unlocking, because you don't want the next achievement. Like, you want to stay where you're at as long as possible. So it's just kind of a very macro view of where you are in terms of your programming and your training history. But beyond that, like on this detailed level, I try to avoid those categorizations, because it's not useful, because people latch on to the category and not the information that I'm trying to present.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
that's a lot easier.
For sure, for sure. If you can just say a word and then everything falls under that word, it's way easier to think about things, and it's way easier to sell somebody like, here is an intermediate program. So you say, okay, me intermediate, I buy intermediate program, I do, and that's super simple, right? But that's not an intelligent approach. I think
Yeah.
like last time we talked about the smooth brain approach to doing programming, which is like novice LP fail reset, novice LP fail reset, Texas method, and that's like, that's dumb as hell.
I feel like you're
Um,
personally attacking me right now, but let's be honest.
Dude,
Yeah.
this is all from personal experience. And it's not only me. Like you see people doing it all over the place. Like
Yeah.
everybody did it this way,
Yeah.
right? Because that's how we interpreted it. And by the way, if you and I would have picked up practical programming and actually read it, we wouldn't have fucked up like that, right? Because after the novice chapter, or in the novice chapter, there is a thing called late novice program or advanced novice or something. Like, I don't even remember, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, it specifically talks about how to progress through the end of the novice phase into the intermediate phase of things. But we didn't do that because you're thinking about all this cool shit in the Texas method that doesn't work for us because we're not strong enough to take advantage of it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And,
So
and quite honestly, I had trouble synthesizing Olive Ripetoe's advice in the blue book, let alone the gray book. And this is kind of the point of this channel and this particular episode. We're just trying to simplify things for you guys. So if you're doing this on your own, you can go do it with fewer issues than what we had. And if you're a coach, you can conceptualize the stuff in a much simpler way.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Let me just state one more time. Like, this is the way I do it. This is not like there is no, let me be really clear about this. There is no like approved starting strength progression for how to go from novice to intermediate to advanced, because that would be silly.
Yep.
That'd be stupid, right?
It's not how it works.
Because people are different. People respond differently, and you have to approach things from simple, general, and basic, moving towards complex, specific, and individual,
Yep.
right? And that's the way it works. So you have to figure it out for yourself, or you hire a coach to help you figure it out, and you progress variables along that progression or that spectrum, or that continuum is probably the best way to say it. You progress your variables along that continuum based on what's happening in your specific process. Now, for almost everybody, the beginning looks the same. 6 months, 8 months in, it mostly looks the same for almost everybody. A year, 2 years in, it looks kind of the same, but mostly like the bulk of the program is going to be individualized to the person you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So at the somebody who's been training for 2 years, I can hand you guys like if I'm talking to the coaches at the gyms, I can hand them a template that is very general. Like it says, a squat, an upper body lift, a pull, an upper body lift, using this protocol in some percentages. And then it's up to them to fill in all of the specifics based on the person they're dealing with. But we can also hand every coach at a gym the novice linear progression and say squat, press, bench, deadlift, power clean, 3 sets of 5 and 5 sets of 3. And everybody's going to do this because that's the way it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's be clear, because people always ask the question of like how, or they ask the question with the intent or with the wanting to understand what is the approved, like what is the way that RIP is going to stamp and say, yes, that's the way to do it correctly. There isn't one, right? There are best practices. And again, this is the way you do with any complicated process. There are best practices as long as you understand what the goal is, and you keep things as basic and simple as you can throughout the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's always going to be the tendency to add more and distract you from simple, basic, in general, right? So, so I'm saying all that because everything that I'm going to say on the press and the deadlift is just the way I do it. You can do other things, and that's fine as long as you're getting stronger, and as long as you're not deviating too much from the parent movements, because when you do that, you don't get as strong as quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
You risk wasting time and convincing yourself that things that are happening for reasons that they're not, right? So that's the danger. So Again, trying to keep things as simple as possible for the deadlift. And this is pretty standard. You know, you're deadlifting every workout initially, and then you're gonna alternate with some other pulling movement, right? We like the power clean because to the extent that you can train timing, coordination, and power, and by train using Rip's definition of physiologic adaptation. If you can train those things, the best way to do it is with a load, and the best way to do it measurably is with a power clean, right? Because you get a long range of motion, you have a definite start and end point. You're using all of the muscles in your body, so is most muscle mass, all that stuff, and it's objective. It gives you an objective start point and end point. So did you rack the bar or not, right? So you can dream up all kinds of different ways to train timing, coordination, and power. So athleticism, in other words, but you're going to have a hard time quantifying how you're training those, right? You're going to have a hard time quantifying how you're progressing those. So the power clean is nice that it gives you a number that's on the bar. Did you rack it or did you not rack it, right? So if you're not interested in those things, or you can't do that lift because of orthopedic issues, you've got herniated discs in your back, or your knees are all torn up, or you can't rack the bar, you'll do a different lift, right? So you'll do either a lighter deadlift, or you can do something else. So but you start alternating the lift. So you start alternating the deadlift with something else.
One set of five.
And one set of five deadlift, alternating with something else. And then eventually you start deadlifting once a week.
Actually, Nick, can I stop you there real quick?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So everyone does this differently, right? But typically I, instead of going straight to alternating the deadlift with another lift, I'll actually just alternate on a Wednesday. So I've got the trainee still deadlifting twice a week, and then I'll move to every other workout. What's your take on that? Worth doing that, or doesn't matter?
Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's perfectly fine. If I've got somebody who's learning the power clean, I want them to practice it fairly often. So I'll, I don't think, especially if their squat is still going up every workout, I'm not too worried about it right now. And remember that you started the deadlift much heavier than you did the squat. So there's a little bit of room there. But I think that's perfectly fine. Just sub in a different lift on Wednesday. So you're kind of staying with that heavy, light, heavy situation that we did on the squat. That's cool. And it gives you a much shorter workout on Wednesdays.
Yeah. And the reason I like doing that is to give a little bit of psychological reprieve, and also because I want to drive the deadlift up as high as possible, especially in front of the squat, because I'm all about, number on the bar, performance. That's what we're here for. But I also realize that I'm being paid by that 40-year-old guy to make him look awesome. And a huge deadlift makes you look great. So I want your deadlift as big as possible.
No question. People don't appreciate the amount of aesthetic change that you get from deadlifting often and deadlifting from pulling heavy and pulling often.
Yep.
So absolutely, I'm on board with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So, but this is one of those things. It's like that's totally cool. How much does it really matter? Because I don't know how quickly after that you're going to once a week deadlifting.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty quickly, right? So
a couple weeks.
Exactly. Maybe 3 weeks, maybe let's say a month even. So long term kind of, like you and I are not going to have a falling out over this particular issue because it's not a big deal. Right.
I prefer you, by the way. You're the guy that gives the programming lecture at the seminar. So
So yeah, man. The one cool thing about, and I don't know why people struggle to understand this or don't figure it out, but if you've got a light squat on Wednesday and you're going to once a week pulling, move the heavy pull to Wednesday.
Yeah.
And now you've got a fresh lifter pulling a heavy PR deadlift every Wednesday. So you're not dealing with all of the fatigue from the squat, and then you can continue to drive the deadlift up. So I really, really, really want the lifter to continue doing heavy sets of 5 on the deadlift off the floor for as long as possible.
Yep.
Way too many people switch to rack pulls way too early. You've got to keep pulling off the floor for as long as possible, 4 sets of 5.
Yep.
The problem is that the deadlift allows you to trick yourself into thinking that it's time to move on to something else way before you actually need to. You can, if you didn't pull on the bar for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, or what feels like 5 to 6 seconds, or what feels like 10 seconds, you didn't give it a full effort, right? So like if your deadlift isn't, and this is where that 50-pound number comes from, if your deadlift isn't 50 pounds ahead of your squat, you can do a set of 5 at that weight. So you're squatting 275, you're deadlifting 280, you can do 280 for 5 on the deadlift. Like right now, today, you can do it. You can actually probably do 330 or more than that. It's just, you're not, you haven't practiced it. You're not used to it. It's just not there today, but you have the strength, in other words, to be able to pull that bar off the floor 5 times.
And a point you've made many times in the past is the trainee may not actually have any idea what it means to work hard against something. And so
that's exactly right.
They just may not and this is where the coach comes in, because I can look at someone that goes to set up for a deadlift. I can tell they put in about 70% effort, tugged on it for a second, and go, oh, it's not budging. Like, no.
Right.
Take 60 seconds, take a breath, and let me tell you what you need to do in this next attempt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that's the deadlift. I mean, pretty early on, you're only deadlifting once a week. And the determining factor in when you progress the deadlift isn't a lift that you're going to forget how to do. It's a really simple movement. So it doesn't require a bunch of frequency. It's really heavy. As long as you're doing it correctly, meaning that you're completing your sets of 5, it's probably giving you enough stress, because you're also squatting a bunch, right? You're doing all this squatting as well. So if you only need to deadlift 1 set of 5 because things are heavy enough and you can continue to do that, then great. Just deadlift 1 heavy set of 5 and just make sure the weight keeps going up and make sure you don't fail reps. It's got to be a set of 5, because you're only pulling stress for the entire week, right? I mean, you're doing lighter pulls for the rest of the week, but in terms of the adaptation that we're looking for, which is a strength adaptation, the bulk of your stress is coming from that single set of 5, and you have to make sure you get it done.
Yep.
So it's really super important.
Last question on the deadlift for you is this whole idea of going back to 10-pound jumps on the deadlift once the guy is, let's say, early intermediate on the squat, is something that was new to me before you introduced me to it. I have yet to test it. Can you walk me through that scenario? Because the thing I'm thinking is I've got, okay, let's say the guy is an early intermediate and he's, low 300s on a squat for his heavy set of 5. And then his deadlift is, mid to high 300s. Is that a situation where you'd have the guy start doing 10-pound jumps?
No. Well, maybe it depends what's happened along the way. So usually when you're in that situation, what's happened is that, because remember, you started the deadlift, or you should have started the deadlift way ahead of the squat. So things shouldn't the numbers shouldn't start to meet until you're much further along in the process. So what's probably happened along the line is that they failed a couple times. They may have had issues setting their back, so their deadlift was artificially held back. They may have given up, a bunch on it. They may have missed workouts on the deadlift, because that always happens. People don't. You got to squat first, so people always squat, but they tend to, if they're going to skip something, they're going to skip the deadlift.
That's a way to play catch up, is what you're saying.
Exactly right. So if they need to catch up, that's when we're going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. If everything's been running fine and normally, then no, that's not somebody you would do that with.
Okay. In that case, I have one more question for you on the deadlift. So if their program is dialed in and they're doing the 1 set of 5 and it's going up, and they're getting to the point where rep 5 is a 2-3 second rep, and their recovery is great, and you're going to make a change. What's your next change, Nick, on the deadlift?
For the deadlift?
Yeah.
Provided that they're doing everything correctly and the deadlift's getting super heavy, I prefer to keep people doing a set of 5 rather than messing with the rep scheme on the deadlift and pulling off the floor. So I'll move them to a low rack pull, and keep doing sets of 5.
Low
So,
rack pull, like mid shin.
Mid shin, exactly. So not all the way up to below the knee, but just mid shin, get it off the floor a little bit, just to shorten the amount of time that they're pulling on the bar, and then just keep running with sets of 5. That works the best. The problem when I say that is that people do that way too early.
Yeah.
So you've got dudes pulling 275 off the pins. That's totally inappropriate. Like they
Right.
should be pulling off the floor still.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless he's 80, you know.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So let's move on to the bench press. Walk us through your simple summary of the early stages of training on the bench, and then what sort of changes you'll make when it's time to move to intermediate programming.
Yeah, so the upper body lifts are start at a different point, right? Because you're alternating them, so you're only seeing them 3 times every 2 weeks. Where the deadlift and the squat, you have a lot higher frequency. So, you start 3 sets of 5, alternating the lifts. Week 1, you bench press bench. Week 2, you press bench press. So, 3 sets of 5, keep adding weight to the bar. Usually, the bench keeps progressing far beyond where the press keeps progressing. So with the bench, and again, this is my preference, because most of the people I deal with want to press more weight than they're pressing. So they're a lot of people are coming to me because they want me to help them with their press. So or they know that I can help them with their press. So, and again, this is my preference, because I like the press. I enjoy coaching and teaching, or coaching and doing the press much more than I do the bench press. So I always just in my head am prioritizing the press, because it's harder to do, and it's more complicated in terms of programming. So I typically deal with the bench the same way that I do with the squat. So 3 sets of 5, keep running it. When it starts to become a problem, 1 set of 5, back off sets. Still alternating.
Yep.
I don't mess with it further until the press needs modification, and then the programming on the press determines what the programming for the bench looks like.
Got it. In that case, can you walk us through the programming on the press?
Yeah. Just one more thing. With that said, if I've got a lifter who has a very shitty bench, and this is pretty common, right? Especially like you get fairly active guys, and this is true for almost all women. You're fairly active guys who like maybe were runners or cyclists, and they'll have a pretty good deadlift and squat, but just an atrocious bench and press. So if that's the case and their bench is super behind, then I'll treat their bench the same way as I do their press, which just means doing it more often and keeping it really, really heavy. So the press starts at 3 sets of 5. Alternating every workout. And then the first thing that starts to happen on the press is you start failing, you start missing reps. I'm not as concerned about failing reps on the press initially as I am with the squat. So the squat is kind of my overall gauge for how the lifter is doing. And it's also the toughest mentally in terms of getting in the gym and starting it, right? In terms of actually executing and getting the 5 reps, the deadlift is definitely the hardest. But if you can get somebody to come in and do the 3 sets of 5 squat, that's your best gauge for how things are going overall. So that's the one I don't want to mess with in terms of people failing. I don't want them to fail a squat in training ever, if possible. I want you to fail reps at your meet, but not in training. Point is that for the press, you start failing. I don't see it as much of a big deal. We got to figure out what's going on. So you start failing the press. The first thing that I'm going to do is tell you to get all 15 reps, so that we keep the volume the same, so that what doesn't happen is that you don't get that reduction in stress that we were talking about earlier. Because as soon as you start missing, if you pack it up for the day, now you're dumping a whole bunch of practice and stress for the upper body. So 2 things that you need critically at this point, because your upper body's weak, right? So get all 15 reps, doesn't matter how you get it done. And usually that shakes out as like 5, 4, 3, 1, 1 or something like that, or 5, 4, 3, 2. So it doesn't matter how many sets it takes, you get all 15. So that's the first change. We'll just run that as long as it's not taking too long to do. So don't take your belt off, rack the bar, shake it out, rest for 30 seconds, and then hit it again, see how many you can get type thing. So um, that doesn't get us very far, because what happens is that when you start getting down to like uh, a bunch of sets of 2 and 1, it just takes too long. So when that's the case, when you're getting down to like really low reps that you can complete, then we'll add a second press day. So that's pretty much it. So once the 15 total reps thing isn't working very well, then just add a second press day. And when you add a second press day, what it looks like is I want a day that's all sets of 5. So 3 to 5 sets of 5 at a weight that you will hit. Like, you're not allowed to fail reps on that day. You have to hit sets of 5, and you cannot fail any reps. So I want to see sets of 5 on day 1, and then I want to see a bunch of singles on day 2. So that can be anywhere from 5 to 10 singles, depending on how shitty your press is. And then the bench press gets fit in somewhere in there. So let's just say, for example, I have a typical member, typical client. On Monday, they're going to be doing their 3x5 bench, or maybe it's like a 1x5 and some back offsets. Then on Wednesday, they're doing 3 to 5 sets of 5 press. And then on Friday, since remember, we're squatting light on Wednesday and we're deadlifting heavy on Wednesday, then Friday, that leaves us some room. I can have them squat on Friday, and then I can have them press like 7 singles, and then I can have them do a heavy set of 5 of bench. So now you're doing both upper body lifts twice a week, and just increasing the frequency from twice a week to alternating to twice a week. That usually just kickstart another round of increases on the upper body lifts.
Makes a big difference, yeah. And you mentioned there's a couple things we should add. When you're running your upper body lifts up, you'll need to move to 2.5 pound jumps. We mentioned that in the first podcast, so I just want to reiterate that. And then Nick also mentioned that on the upper body stuff, when you're doing the volume day or the medium day, whatever you want to call it, 3 to 5 sets of 5. And Nick, just confirm my understanding here. So the fewer amount of the least amount of work you can do to accomplish the goal is what you're after. So if you have a choice between 3 sets of 5, 4 sets of 5, and 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 5. And then if that stops working, 4 sets of 5. And then if that stops working, 5 sets of 5, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. On the upper body, another factor is how strong you already are, right? So if somebody has a fairly big bench press, and a fairly big press, they can do 3 sets of 5. If they've got a really underdeveloped bench and press, it's a nice way of saying like really shitty bench and press, they're going to do 5 sets of 5. So yeah. And by the way, those 5 sets of 5 and those singles are happening with a very short rest, because they're not stressful. You're squatting in the high 2s, maybe low 3s, and you're pressing 130 pounds. That 130 pounds is not stressful. And if you're doing 5 sets of 5 off of a 130-pound single, you're doing them at like 120. So you can knock out 5 sets of 5 at 120 pounds in under 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Just knock them out,
Bree, you got to add Ben's video of him doing his 175-pound press last week under Nick's guidance, because Ben is my brother, is one of these slow responders on the upper body stuff, and Nick has managed to get his press to 175 pounds. And I want to show that video, one, because I'm proud of him and he looks awesome, and secondly because it was probably a 5-second rep, and it might have even dipped down a little bit above his forehead, but he didn't give up, and the thing locked out at the top. So that was pretty impressive to watch.
Yeah, Ben's bar speed is about equal to like my 58-year-old women.
But he doesn't give up, and he's still
he doesn't give
progress.
up, man.
Yeah, and doing jiu-jitsu too.
Yeah, it's not a knock on Ben. Steve Ross is the same way. Steve. I always tell Steve that, like, I've got a client. Delise.
Oh yeah.
I've seen her grind on a press for 9 seconds.
Jesus.
And Steve Ross does the same thing.
I just get worried people are going to pass out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're running up at about the time I'd like to probably wrap things up. I think you did a really good job of explaining the principles here, explaining a sample of how to run through each lift and covering all the key points. Is there anything that you missed that you want to cover before we wrap up here?
Just the larger point that when you get to quote unquote intermediate programming, so let's just say when you are post novice, so you're beyond novice training, you're the stress level has to be continually increasing. That's an easy thing to do. It happens automatically in the novice program, right? Because you're just adding 5 pounds every time. It's easy to screw things up really bad on the once you've gone to weekly increases and then biweekly increases and so on, because people tend to dump stress. So things cannot get easier. If they get easier, if you're excited about the programming change that you just made, it wasn't a good programming change. Like you're about to run into some problems. So when you look at the next programming change that you should make, you may be excited about it initially because it may mean some more PRs. It may mean doing sets of 3 rather than sets of 5. It may mean doing singles for the first time, but those need to suck pretty bad, pretty quick. And if they don't, you're doing something wrong. And honestly, for people who start out with starting strength, you're kind of always excited for the PR. So that may even be the wrong approach or the wrong way to think about it, because the PRs are kind of what you're driving. So you can kind of psych yourself up for those. You got to look at the rest of the week too and make sure that you're not dumping stress on the other days of the week. Like the number one mistake when people ask me to look at their programming and tell me what they're doing wrong or why they're failing is not because they're doing something wrong on the heavy days, intensity days, whatever you want to call it, on the PR days, because they're doing something wrong on the other days. They're using a protocol that doesn't work. They're trying to do either too much work or not enough work. So figure out how to try to look at your program from a big picture perspective and just try to imagine what the overall stress is compared to last week and the week before and the week before that. And if you can kind of zoom out and look at your program at that level, you'll be much more successful. So you should be looking at your stress just kind of continually going up somewhere. And you got to move beyond just thinking individually on the lifts. You also have to consider the overall stress of your program, because it's definitely a factor, right? So you have to, it's probably the most important thing as you go through, your 6 month to 1 year. And then definitely after you've been training for 2 years, you have to always be considering the overall stress that you're applying to yourself. So with that said, the stress needs to be a force production stress. As soon as it stops being a force production stress, you're going to stop hitting PRs, and you may think you're doing things like hypertrophy or getting jacked or whatever, but you're not getting stronger. And whatever you're trying to accomplish with your hypertrophy work or whatever other shit you're trying to do, that is best accomplished by continuing to get stronger,
Yep.
right? So that's the time to look at your program, make sure you're still actually strength training, and then at the intermediate phase, quote unquote, is when people start thinking about other things to do, which is great, right? Other hobbies. People pick up jujitsu. The guys who are just in their garage and don't have other hobbies, this is when they start talking about going on a cut or some shit. Regardless of what you're doing, doesn't matter if you're like going on a cut or doing jujitsu or starting to play tennis or whatever it is. You should continue to be trying to get stronger. Everything else needs to fit into that. If it's a cut, you need to clean up your diet. If it's jujitsu, you're going to have to back off, or another sport, you're going to have to figure out where to back off on the overall stress so that you can continue working on the force production stress in the gym. So that's kind of a complicated topic, but you have to, you're in this because you want to keep getting stronger. You want to maintain your strength or continue gaining strength. And that should always be the goal, regardless of what else is going on. Your performance improvements in your hobbies and in your life, your aesthetic improvements, and all the other things that come with barbell training that you enjoyed during the novice linear progression, you need to still be continuing to drive towards those things in more advanced programming, just becomes more complicated. And that's, honestly, it's a good time to hire a coach to help you manage all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You're no longer going to get stronger by accident. I mean, you can,
Exactly. Right.
you can screw things up and meander your way to a 300-pound squat with shitty programming and take, 6 months or take several years. Most people can do that. But once you get to that point, it's really hard to freestyle and just figure things out and hopefully make some progress. You really need to become your own coach and learn this stuff, or hire someone that can help you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point, man. Yeah. If you're not going to hire a coach, and that's kind of self-serving for us to say you need to hire a coach. But it's the truth.
Yeah.
But look, we talk about this all the time, like in our self-sufficient lifter camps and stuff like that. You can do this yourself, but it's going to take some effort. Like
Yes.
you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to read some stuff, read practical programming for sure. Read the barbell prescription. Don't convince yourself that you are an old person because you're over 40, but read the barbell prescription. And get to work applying this to yourself. Just make small changes so that you don't screw everything up.
Yep.
But if that's you, if you like to tinker, if you like to learn about the process yourself, then apply it to yourself carefully and apply it to other people. You can definitely gain a lot from doing it that way. If you're not going to spend the time like learning how to program yourself and program other people, then hire a coach and outsource it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Or do it wrong, hurt yourself, and then start doing hypertrophy. Nick, this was super helpful. Thank you for your time, man.
Good.
Anything you want to add before we go? Social media handle, stuff like that.
Social media handle, Nick D_SSC.
Cool.
We've got no, other than that, I mean, I think everybody knows where to find me.
Great. Yeah. And if you guys listen to this, have questions and comments, definitely throw them in the YouTube comments, because those are always fun. But I don't think YouTube comments are the best place to discuss intermediate programming. So if you have a legitimate question about your situation, the forum has answered all questions that have ever been asked. And if you search around and you can't find the answer to your question, then post, and it can be addressed in detail there, provided you put some time into a thoughtful post. The YouTube comments is just not appropriate for this kind of conversation. Cool. Thank you, Nick. Till next time.
All right. Thank you.
See you guys.